It's time to live your stronger life. Hey, I'm Sammy, physio coach and nutritionist, and your hype girl for creating your stronger life. Here, we ditch the quick fixes and build real strength inside and out. So whether you're here to tone up, drop the body fat, build muscle, mental resilience, or ditch the diet culture, or just feel bloody good in your skin, you're in the right place. So let's get into it. Alright fam, in this episode I'm about to make your life so much easier and so much more simpler. We're going to simplify meal prep, because if you are constantly searching for new recipes to stay on track, if you feel like you just cannot hit your macros unless someone else hands you a specific meal plan, and you just find finding the right recipe, doing the meal prep, finding all the 1001 ingredients from the shops that you're only going to ever use once, and it's just all very overwhelming, then this episode is going to free you up. Because here's the truth. You don't need recipes to hit your macros, you don't need 1001 different ingredients, and you do not actually need a different meal plan every single week. You just need a system and structure that I'm going to give you, that this is what I teach to all of my clients, and it's just going to make it super duper simple. We're going to break it down into really easy macros, think protein, carbs, fats, produce. We are going to use the build a plate method, plus I've got some other sneaky little hacks to make your meal prep a little bit easier for you in this episode. All right, let's get into it. First of all, stop thinking in recipes, start thinking in components. So instead of naming it like chicken, pesto, pasta bake with blah, 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 feta, cheese, and I don't know, anchovies on top. That's weird. I don't know why I thought of that, but just instead of the complicated teriyaki, salmon, guachuan, poke bowl vibe with this and that, like all the complicated recipes that sound delicious, look amazing on Instagram, in reality, they are pain in the asses to cook. They use 1001 ingredients. They take way too long, and you got to time it all right, and it's just like, oh my God. And then you have them a couple of times, you're like, delicious, but then after a few, you're like, this is disgusting, because it's just too flavorsome, too fancy, too complicated, and you just get sick of that meal prep. So this is what I want you to do instead. Stop thinking in recipes, start thinking in components. Break it down. What's the protein source, a carbohydrate source, a fat source, and fruit or veggies? Every single meal can just fit that simple framework. And once you understand that, you stop relying on recipes and you can start building meals so much more confidently. And so I recommend doing this with the skeleton strategy. And this is really beneficial if you struggle with consistency, but you also don't necessarily want to eat the same meal every single day. Like for me personally, I eat the exact same routine of food every single day. It's super duper easy. There's a few places where I may rotate things around. Maybe I'll have rice cakes instead of cereal. I'll change the flavor of protein powder that I'm using, but honestly, I literally just eat the same thing every single day on repeat because I enjoy it, and I also do not like thinking about my food. But if you are someone who does prefer to have a little bit of variety but also needs that consistency and routine, then this skeleton strategy is absolutely perfect for you. So first of all, start by creating one solid day of eating. Not perfect, not fancy, just repeatable. A simple full day of eating that you can relatively repeat when we follow the base structure. So pick out your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and your snacks. It's a base structure. Then when you want the variety, we're just going to swap one or two components. So let's say, for example, you want overnight oats. Then you could do everything the same, but you're just going to swap it for, maybe you bake the oats instead of overnight oats, or perhaps you swap the oats for Wheat Bix. You just, as long as you know, okay, I know that, for example, maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to use, 35 or maybe it's 40 grams of oats, and that is the equivalent to 2 Wheat Bixes, then you can just literally rotate between them, and you don't have to overcomplicate the tracking and the macro counting, because you just literally swap one for the other. And so when you have a bank of foods, have a bank of carbohydrates, have a bank of fats, have a bank of proteins that you can just interchange between, then it makes tracking so much easier. So breakfast, you could do overnight oats, overnight Wheat Bix. Rotate between those two, exactly the same macros. If you do the math so it works out properly, then easy. Variety with structure. Lunch, say you cook chicken and you're like, I'm sick of chicken, I can't look at it twice. Okay, you say you're having chicken, rice, veggies. Simple. Now, why don't you do mince, rice, veggies? And you're just going to swap 100 grams of chicken for 100 grams of extra lean beef mince. You don't have to overcomplicate it. It's very, very similar. And now it's super duper easy. Maybe you're like, cool, I don't want rice. All right, I'm going to do, say 125 grams of rice maybe is equal to 50 grams of pasta. Don't quote me on that. I'm just doing these numbers off the top of my head. But maybe you're like, cool, 125 cooked rice is the same as 50 grams of raw pasta. So I know that I can just rotate between those two ingredients, keep the same everything else. And it's just going to mean mean I get variety without overcomplicating it. See here how we're creating a skeleton. I know I need like 100 grams of raw meat, I need like 100 grams of rice, or I need 50 grams of pasta, or maybe it's 150 grams of potato. It's like, okay, I know I want to have like 50 grams of carbohydrates in my meal. I want to have 30 grams of protein in my meal, and I need to have about 150 grams of veggies. And so if you just have that base skeleton, then you can just slot in the actual ingredients and give that a little bit of variety. You know, broccoli one day could be a raw salad mix, could be green beans another day. Change the sauces, change the seasonings. It's all the same structure with different flavors and one or two components that you're swapping between. Don't do everything at once, just one or two. Maybe it's chicken, rice, veggies. Then it's chicken, potato, salad. Chicken, pasta, different type of veggies. Like, see how it's the same, but slightly different, and it's building that skeleton day structure. Another really beautiful strategy is to split your targets. So for example, say if you've got, 2,000 calories in a day, you could split that up into your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and your snacks, divide it equally across the day. So, it's like 500 calories a meal. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it is a simple guide so that by the end of the day, you're not scrambling to make up, 80 grams of protein by 9 p.m. So start with rough targets per meal. Split your calories, your protein, your carbs, and your fats, or at least your calories and the protein. The carbs and fats don't matter too much, but you just don't want to go too low on your fats, and you don't want to go too low on your carbohydrates, because you do want to support your health and hormones and your training, and you also want to make sure you hit your fiber target and all that jazz. So it is nice just to split it pretty evenly, and it does help you just to feel more balanced throughout the day, but primarily focus on splitting your calories and your protein, divide it by how many meals you want to eat in a day, whether you want to do 3 big meals and maybe leave a little bit for snacks, or do you want to have 4 even meals throughout the day, but just split it up, and that's how you know how many calories and how many carbohydrates and how much protein and how much fats that you want to hit per meal. That's where before, when I was like, okay, well, I know I need 50 grams of carbs in a meal, 30 grams of protein in a meal. When you split your daily target up by 4, then you know exactly what you kind of want to achieve, and then you can create a list of foods that you can just rotate between. Then we can build your plate. Pick a protein, pick a carb, pick a produce and healthy fat, and you're off to the races. It's going to just help you to start with rough targets, and then you can obviously adjust and tweak it after doing that. So here's how you build a plate without requiring a recipe. So breakfast example, protein powder, oats are for your carbohydrates, fruits for your fiber and carbohydrates, nut butter for your healthy fats. Okay, what about a wrap? Or you could do a wrap. So you could do chicken for your protein, and then you could do carbohydrates could be a wrap, or if you wanted to swap it, you could do rice or you could do potato, and then for your produce, you could do salad or you could do veggies, and then for your healthy fats, you may do avocado, or you may do full fat cheese, or you may do a perinade sauce or something like that. Then if you wanted for dinner, for example, hit your protein, you could pick a fish or a meat. And then for your carbohydrates, you may do rice or potatoes. For your produce, you're going to do veggies, or maybe you're going to do salad, and you can rotate between the type of veggies or salads that you're choosing. And then for your healthy fats, maybe you're going to cook in oil, maybe you're going to add some butter onto your potatoes, or again, you could use a sauce or have some avocado. And then when it comes to a snack, protein yogurt, then you could pair that with some fruit. There's your protein and your carbohydrates. And then maybe you have some rice cakes, more carbohydrates, with some peanut butter on top, healthy fats. It doesn't have to be complicated. You're not having to make any special complicated meals or fancy recipe labels. You're just assembling components to create a balanced plate full of foods that you actually enjoy, that hit your calorie needs. All right, so now if you freeze up wondering, all right, well, where do I start? How much do I log? I mean, first do what I recommended, split your meals up by, 3 or 4, and then work out your calories and your protein target, and then get a list of your protein foods, your carb foods, your fat foods that you like, and work out how much of those portions you need to kind of roughly get you to those targets as a starting point. But here's another, for most ladies, here's a pretty good rule of thumb, a good reasonable starting point. So for proteins, you're generally going to need somewhere between 100 to 125 grams of raw meat or fish. For protein powder, 30 to 40 gram serving size of that. Fruit, start with like 100 to 150 grams per meal. Veggies, start at like 100, 150, even 200 grams of veggies per meal. Oats or cereal, if you're in a dieting phase, somewhere between 30 to 40 grams of oats usually is like pretty decent for oats and cereals. Cooked rice or cooked pasta, maybe starting with like 100 grams cooked. That could be a nice starting point. Potatoes, you may do like 150 to 200 grams raw as a starting point, and then adjust. Need more protein, increase the serving size of the meat. Carbs are too high, reduce the rice or potatoes slightly. Fats are too high, ease back on the oils, the butter, the avocado, or the cheese. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a really beautiful starting point, and then it's really easy to be repeatable once you have your list of foods that you like and you get a rough idea of the portions that will, generally speaking, fit your macro needs. All right, here is another little life hack on how to make meal prep a little bit easier. So choose the numbers and divide them evenly. So if you know that you're going to cook 500 gram packet of chicken, because most meats come in 500 grams or a kilo, right? So if you're going to cook 500 grams of chicken, that's either 500 gram portions or 425 gram portions. So if you know that you need 100 grams of chicken in each of your meals to hit your macros, and you cook 500 grams of chicken, then you can just distribute it into 5 reasonably even serves without micro weighing every single plate, and you know that you're going to get roughly the right amount of chicken per serve. So if you do things like that, like if you know, all right, I need to have X amount of protein, veggies, carbs in my meal, and I'm going to do a big stir fry, if you just times that by 5, throw it all together, spread it out over 5 meals, you're going to be pretty damn close. That structure reduces your stress. All right, this is a really important one to understand though. Raw versus cooked tracking, because weight changes when food's cooked. So meat and potatoes and veggies, they'll lose water, so they weigh less after cooking. So 100 grams of chicken raw is not 100 grams cooked. That is different. 100 grams of chicken may go down to, 70 grams when it's cooked. So it loses water, it dehydrates, so it gets denser, and so it loses its weight. Rice and pasta absorb water, so they weigh more. So if you portion out 30 grams of rice, that's going to almost times 3 into a cooked version. So a simple shortcut, I don't know, it depends on how you cook it, the size of the meat, how much it loses its water, things like that. 100 grams of chicken raw may come out to 60 to 70 grams cooked, depending on how juicy you leave it versus how dried out it gets. So if you want consistency and more accuracy, track it raw and then portion it using a rough ratio. So 2 ways that you can do that. If, again, like I mentioned, if you cook 500 grams of chicken, no matter what the weight it comes out at, you just split it up 5 ways, and that's your 5 serves. You're getting about 100 grams of raw chicken per meal. Or what you can do is you can divide the cooked weight by the raw weight, and then that gives you a little ratio of what the rate of change is. So say, for example, if it was 60 grams of cooked chicken and you cooked 100 grams raw, then you know that you pop 60 grams of cooked chicken on your plate, but you can track in your app 100 grams raw. That's another nice way to do it. Whatever you do, it's got to be consistent. The main thing is just be consistent. Another suggestion is that you can make a recipe. So say if you cook 500 grams of chicken, create a recipe in your tracking app, and then say 500 grams of raw chicken in the ingredients, and then the serves are, you weigh the cooked chicken at the end, and the weight of that, say it's you cook 500 grams of chicken, say it just comes out as 300 grams, then you would say there's 300 serves in that recipe. And so when you track it in your app, you weigh out however much you use, and you do that by how many serves. So if you weigh out 20 grams of this new cooked chicken, you'll say 20 serves, and that will give you the calories and the ratio that it has changed. Now, when it comes to tracking and the accuracy, remember that tracking apps allow user entry. So that means not every listing that's in there is going to be correct and accurate. So try and look for verified entries when possible, use credible databases, but most importantly, pick one entry and stick to it, because consistency will beat perfection every single time when it comes to tracking. And also use common sense. If you use 10 grams of chicken and it's 10 grams of chicken or cheese or whatever, and it says 300 calories or 500 calories, something that's wild, it's wrong. And so look for an entry that is more correct, whether it has a valid tick, or you can rely from the database, such as the Nutrition Australian database, or is it from the USADA database? If you can have a more reliable, accurate one, that's better. But otherwise, just look for one with a tick, or just also use a bit of common sense, or check the nutrition labels. That's another option for you there. Just some other little tidbits to consider. Frozen or packaged foods, most labels are based on the frozen or the uncooked weight, so way before cooking when you can, when it comes to like frozen veggies and frozen potatoes and things like that. Ready-made meals, log them first and then build the rest of your day around them, and because the calories of those can be quite variable, and add some extra veggies. They're always low on veggies, so add some extra veggies into those. And when you are cooking for your family, the best option is, portion your ingredients first, or have yours set aside before adding any extra oils and sauces if you want to do that. Or you can just estimate, roughly, maybe weigh your serving of protein and your carbohydrates, but then just like be a bit chill, enjoy, have your family dinner, be reasonably tight to what you're doing, but just make sure the rest of the day is pretty accurate, and then your family dinner is not going to be as impactful. Or you can actually create a recipe in MyFitnessPal, and then there's tricks to that. That's for a whole nother podcast on how to do that, but you can track the recipe and actually weigh your food accurately, and then the family can do whatever you want. There are so many different options when it comes to cooking for your family, but they're just a couple of little tidbits that I can talk about in another podcast episode. If that would interest you, let me know. Message me on Instagram, tell me you want to hear more about how to cook for your family and stay on track. We can do an episode on that. But the hidden calories usually come from the oils and the butters and the sauces that you're using, not your potatoes. So do not cut out your carbs. Just because your family eating carbs, you can definitely eat them with it. And then another little tidbit is make the same food just feel different. Variety doesn't need to require new macros. Change the shape, change the seasoning, change the presentation. Wedges instead of diced potatoes, or mashed potatoes, tacos instead of a burrito bowl. Loaded fries style plate using the exact same ingredients. There's so many different ways you can use a potato to make it feel like a different meal. Same structure, different experience, same macros. So that's just like another kind of option for you. Hopefully this gives you some different ideas on how to think about your meal prep beyond just following a perfect recipe, and it gives you the way that you can have simple structure, skeleton base, but not more complicated. You don't need more recipes, you just need a repeatable structure. So just build one day and copy it, and then make small swaps, adjust portions. Tracking doesn't have to be perfect, but you will tweak and adjust along the way. Go create your list of your protein, your carb, your fat foods that you love, and work out the portions that roughly are going to fit your macros really beautifully. And then just remember that consistency is always what matters most. Simplify it and you'll actually be able to stick to it. Stop saving 1,001 recipes off Instagram because you're never going to do them, and try this strategy instead. Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode valuable, please rate, review, and subscribe. And I'd love if you shared this on your Instagram and tag me Sammy_livestrong. And if you'd like to learn more about my coaching and join the Project Livestrong family, please message me Livestrong on Instagram and I'll see how I can help. I'll see you next time.